What's up guys, Rich here with Mondaine's EVO2. So right away, we're probably going to have two immediate thoughts regarding the design of this watch. One, it's on the simpler side in terms of design. And secondly, we've seen this in the form of a clock across Switzerland's train stations. In fact, it's visible across 3,000 platforms in Switzerland known as the Swiss railway clock. So you would be right, as those two thoughts were by design by Mondaine. By design because yes, it's on the simpler side in design because yes, it's the Swiss railway clock in the form of a wristwatch. I don't think we necessarily need to understand the history of the design, though understanding a little bit about it makes us appreciate the watch a bit more. I say it like this because regardless of its history, I still think it's a standalone and handsome three-timer. So a little history for context. In 1944, the clock's designer Hans Hilfiger designed what would later become the official Swiss railway clock. And he used to be employed by the Swiss railway company. Then in 1986, Mondaine had an epiphany to turn one of the most iconic designs into a watch with their classic. Then in 2001, they produced the EVO1. Then fast forward to 2019, as they gave us the EVO2, which also honors the 75th anniversary of the Swiss railway clock. There were some differences between the EVO1 and the EVO2. The EVO1 had a Hesalite crystal and a quartz movement. The EVO2 uses a sapphire crystal and a Swiss Solida automatic movement. The railway clock is definitely one of the most iconic designs, and it's so popular and beloved that I've seen this design used more than just on watches. I've seen this design used on umbrellas. So that's just how beloved this look is. And in fact, I've read somewhere that it is so iconic and recognizable that it is right up there with the original Coca-Cola bottle and the Nike logo. Though I'm not so sure about that Nike logo, but it is definitely a beloved look. The EVO2 is in 40 millimeters, 50 lug to lug. It's 10.9 millimeters tall, and it uses a 20 millimeter bracelet or strap width. So I think this is a very aesthetically appeasing watch. It is definitely a very nicely finished watch as well. And it has to be one of the most legible dials that I've come across in a really long time. It is just really easy to read with that black against that white and those wonderful splashes of red. And we can't ignore that second hand, and I'll touch on that in just a moment. The dial is, I think, really well done. It's very true to the railway clocks. It's slightly raised applied markers. The hour and hands are made of brass. And underneath where it says Mondaine, we'll see the red, which is the logo of the Swiss railway system. And then it has three abbreviations there that represent the three official languages in Switzerland: German, French, and Italian. So that red second hand right there, the tip of that is the design of the conductor's disc. So the conductor would use that whenever he wanted to wave someone down or get someone's attention. Those splashes of red also extend to the lacquered insert with the Mondaine logo in that crown. So well thought out, very true, very attractive in my opinion here. When I mentioned the 20 millimeter bracelet or strap width, there is a little bit more of a difference to that watch than just choosing the mesh bracelet or the leather strap. On the mesh bracelet here, the case is done in entirely brushed finishing. If we chose the leather strap, it is done in entirely polished finishing. I chose the brushed finishing because I think it just looks really appropriate here on this. So that's the difference between the mesh and the leather strap. The mesh bracelet is one of the nicer mesh bracelets out there. It is also not the common pressure release one, meaning this is a deploying clasp. So if we're used to the other kind of mesh bracelets with the pressure release where we just pull it out a little bit and then the clasp would adjust by sliding up and down along the bracelet, this is not the case. It's a lot simpler than that. All we need to do is take the one end of the bracelet and then slide it through the keeper. Though it was a little more challenging on this particular model, but it does fit through there. But it is also well designed in other areas as well. And what I mean by that is, see from the lug to lug here, the bracelet, if I folded it inwards, it does not come into contact with the case on either side. So what that means is it will not rub up against the case, which means it won't leave any scuff marks along the case because it never touches that. So to me, very well thought out, nicely planned. It is also a very comfortable bracelet. The bracelet uses quick release spring bar, so no tools are required to change off the bracelet for a strap or a different type of bracelet. Nice convenience. Overall, this is a very attractive and handsome watch, very well made. There are two areas worth noting, and because this is so true to the Swiss Railway clocks, there isn't any loom on this. And the crown is not a screw down crown, though it is water resistant to 30 meters. So for everyday wear, we're not going to want to take to swimming, but washing our hands or a quick jaunt from the car to the office in the rain will just be just fine with that. Just two areas worth noting to an otherwise really well-made watch, very handsome watch that I think would be just, it's a fun watch to me, but in addition to it being fun, and I enjoyed learning more about the history behind this clock because I didn't know as much about this. It makes it much more pleasurable to me. And so I think this is a handsome watch. It is a fun watch and definitely a watch that I think is going to find its way to a lot of people. It is already a popular watch. I think even though it is on the simpler side, there are a lot of people that don't like fancy looking watches and prefer something like this. I do like fancy watches. While I do like fancy watches, I also like some simpler watches. And I think the EVO2 fits in between there really nicely. It's a fun watch to wear, and I know that it's also a really well-made watch. I'm going to share the presentation that the EVO2 comes in, and it's this sort of woolen wallet here. Here's the conductor's disc as the flap, and this is the wallet that the watch comes in. On the simpler side, but very consistent with the theme of this watch. And while this is a review for the EVO2, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the Mondaine brand because I think they do some really creative details to the watch inside and out. They also have a model called the Stop to Go, which is also has a very similar look to this because on the railway clocks, time freezes. And what I mean by that is when a seconds hand would reach the 60-minute marker, both the minute hand and the seconds hand stops for about 2 seconds. And then the minute hand would lurch forward to the next minute, and the seconds hand would accelerate to make up for that 58 seconds so the watch is not inaccurate. And that's based on the clocks in Switzerland. Basically, the idea of that was that it was all controlled by the central hub so that all the clocks across the different platforms were at the same time. They don't do that anymore, but it was just another thoughtful and detailed touch by Mondaine. The automatic movement on this is, as I said, the Sellita 200 movement. The accuracy-wise, it is about 8 to 10 seconds a day in accuracy. And the reason I'm pointing that out is it is better than a lot of the other Sellita movement that are out of the box. Without any regulating to the movement, we'll get between 12 seconds, 18 seconds, 20 seconds a day in accuracy. So I'm not sure if they've actually regulated this movement, but they've done a pretty good job in terms of the accuracy. 8 to 9 seconds a day is very reasonable for the Sellita 200 movement, especially for this price point. The retail price on the EVO2 with the mesh bracelet is $720 or $665 on the leather strap. So I think for a Swiss-made brand, and Mondaine is a Swiss-made brand, which would just make sense for them to be able to make the Swiss Railway clock. I think if anyone's looking for that Swiss-made watch, this is a great entryway to that. Regardless if we understand the history of this, as I mentioned, it's still a very attractive watch. So I think that makes it really worth our attention. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you the next time.